Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something profound. Your mind is not your enemy, but it is not automatically your ally either. It's a tool. And tools must be trained, sharpened, and intentionally used. Every moment, your brain is doing one of two things, reacting or directing. The power to control your mind lies in training it to direct rather than react. And that starts with understanding how it works. First, realize that your prefrontal cortex, the front part of your brain, is your command center. It governs decision-making, focus, planning, and impulse control. But it doesn't always have the steering wheel unless you give it the keys. If you don't train it, other parts of your brain, the emotional centers, will take over. So the question isn't, can I control my mind? The real question is, am I training the part of my brain that's designed to lead? The human brain is not a single system, but rather a network of interacting regions that have evolved to help us survive, adapt, and thrive. At the center of mental control lies the prefrontal cortex, the region just behind your forehead. This part of the brain plays a critical role in goal setting, decision-making, impulse control, and planning. When people talk about mind over emotion or thinking before acting, they're describing the function of the prefrontal cortex in action. But here's the truth, it's not automatically in charge. Much of the brain's activity is subconscious, habitual, or reactive. The brainstem, limbic system, and midbrain are all wired for reflexive survival, fast responses, emotional reactions, threat detection. These systems are powerful and deeply rooted in our evolution, which is why we often find ourselves reacting emotionally before we've had a chance to think rationally. Understanding how to control your mind starts with knowing how to activate and strengthen the prefrontal cortex so it can take the lead. This area of the brain works best when it's supported by rest, focus, and the absence of overwhelming stress. Chronic stress, fatigue, and excessive stimulation weaken its ability to function. That's why when you're overwhelmed, you often make impulsive decisions, lash out, or procrastinate. In those moments, your prefrontal cortex is offline and your more primitive brain circuits are taking control. The good news is that with practice and deliberate training, you can strengthen the prefrontal cortex just like a muscle. Mental exercises such as reflection, deep focus, journaling, meditation, and strategic planning all engage this region. Over time, repeated activation of these neural pathways reinforces your ability to pause, evaluate, and act with intention instead of impulse. Another crucial insight is that the prefrontal cortex is also tied to your sense of identity, your ability to hold a long-term goal in mind and behave in ways that align with that goal. When you visualize your future self, when you delay gratification to pursue something meaningful, when you regulate your behavior to match your values, you are engaging the prefrontal cortex. This is one of the most powerful levers of mind control, aligning your current actions with a clear image of who you want to become. The clearer and more emotionally meaningful that future identity is, the stronger the signal to the brain that it's worth staying focused and disciplined in the present moment. It's also important to note that the prefrontal cortex doesn't operate in isolation. It communicates constantly with the limbic system, the emotional center of the brain. Your emotions can either hijack or harmonize with your rational thinking, depending on how well you've trained the connection between the two. Emotional awareness and regulation strategies like naming your emotions or labeling stress responses allow the prefrontal cortex to calm the limbic system and take back control. You can literally observe this in brain imaging. The moment someone labels an emotion out loud, the amygdala's activation decreases and the prefrontal cortex becomes more active. The implication here is profound. Control is not about suppression, but about integration. You don't silence emotion to be in control of your mind. You recognize it, understand it, and then respond with deliberate choice. This is what separates reactive behavior from conscious action. Every time you pause before reacting, you give your prefrontal cortex a chance to lead. Every time you reflect before deciding or stay focused in the face of temptation, you train this executive center to become stronger and more reliable. Ultimately, controlling your mind means consistently choosing intentional responses over reflexive ones. It means investing in the long-term wiring of your brain by practicing focus, regulating emotion, visualizing goals, and creating internal order. The more you do this, the more your brain adapts to serve the life you want, not the impulses you're trying to escape. You don't have to control everything. But when you train the part of your brain designed to lead, you begin to control what matters most: your actions, your attention, and your future. Second, your brain is plastic, meaning it can change, grow, and rewire itself. This is neuroplasticity. Every time you resist a distraction, finish a task, sit in discomfort, or pause before reacting, you're reshaping the pathways in your brain. That's not metaphor. That's biology. The more you repeat intentional actions, the more control you build. Neurons that fire together wire together. Repetition carves control into your nervous system. The human brain is not static. It is a dynamic, constantly evolving organ capable of profound transformation. This capacity for change is known as neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is the scientific principle that the structure and function of neural networks in the brain can be modified in response to experience, learning, behavior, and even thought. It means that the brain you have today is not the brain you were born with, and more importantly, it's not the brain you'll have next year unless you do nothing to change it. Understanding this principle is foundational to learning how to control your mind, because it means mental control isn't something you're either born with or without. It's something you can build. When you repeat a behavior or pattern of thinking, the neurons associated with that action become more strongly connected. This is summed up in the well-known neuroscience phrase: neurons that fire together wire together. Every time you focus, resist a distraction, or complete a task despite discomfort, you're reinforcing a specific neural circuit. Over time, these circuits become your default. Just like lifting weights builds muscle through progressive overload, repeated cognitive and emotional effort builds neural strength. Conversely, the circuits you neglect or avoid will weaken. If you constantly give in to distraction, if you avoid stress or give up easily, you are training your brain to be impulsive, anxious, or passive. This is not motivational fluff. It is measurable, observable brain science. Neuroplasticity is experience dependent, meaning it works in whatever direction you choose to aim it. If you choose to focus on fear, worry, and self-doubt, your brain will become more efficient at generating those states. But if you choose to repeatedly return your attention to calm focus and goal-oriented behavior, your brain will adapt in that direction. The ability to control your mind, then, is the ability to direct your plasticity intentionally, to create the internal architecture required for the life you want to live. And this control doesn't require dramatic transformation overnight. In fact, the most effective neuroplasticity changes occur through small, consistent efforts. 10 minutes a day of deliberate, focused practice is more effective for rewiring the brain than 1 hour of sporadic effort once a week. Another powerful aspect of neuroplasticity is that it is use-dependent, not time-dependent. While the brain is more plastic in youth, it retains the ability to rewire itself throughout life, but only in response to consistent use. This means that age is not a limiting factor. Whether you're 15 or 50, the brain remains capable of reshaping itself through repeated and focused mental practice. That also means you are never stuck. Your current habits, mindset, or mental limitations are not permanent unless you repeatedly reinforce them. Training the brain through neuroplasticity also requires one key component: attention. Attention is the gatekeeper of plasticity. The brain doesn't rewire based on what you passively experience. It rewires based on what you consciously focus on. When you pay close attention to what you're doing, especially when it's difficult, your brain flags that moment as important, and that's when plasticity is most active. This is why distractions and multitasking are not just productivity killers. They're enemies of plasticity. They dilute your attention and reduce the brain's ability to encode new patterns. There is also a biological cost to plasticity effort. It feels difficult not because something's wrong, but because the brain is using energy to change its wiring. Mental effort is the metabolic signal that neuroplasticity change is occurring. So when you feel resistance while learning something new or pushing through discomfort, that's not failure. That's proof that your brain is adapting. Reframing that effort as progress is essential. You're not just getting through a tough moment. You're literally sculpting a new mind. When you embrace neuroplasticity, you stop seeing mental control as a gift and start treating it like a skill, something earned, something trained, something developed over time. You begin to realize that your brain is listening to your actions. Every choice you make is a vote for the kind of brain you're building. Control your repetition and you control your rewiring. And when you control your rewiring, you control your mind. The foundation of mental control is not only neurological, but also physiological. One of the most powerful and underrated systems involved in mind control is the autonomic nervous system, the network that governs your internal state without conscious effort. It regulates your heart rate, breathing, digestion, pupil dilation, and more. Within this system are two primary branches: the sympathetic nervous system, which triggers alertness and readiness, and the parasympathetic nervous system, which promotes calm and recovery. The balance between these systems determines whether your body is in a state of stress or safety, and that state directly affects your thoughts, focus, and emotional control. The critical insight here is this: your internal state drives your mental state. And if you want to control your mind, you must learn to regulate your internal physiology first. When you are in a sympathetic state, often triggered by stress, uncertainty, or perceived threats, your heart rate increases, your breathing becomes shallow, your muscles tighten, and your brain shifts attention toward threat detection. This is incredibly useful in life or death scenarios, but disastrous when trying to think clearly, stay calm, or make thoughtful decisions. Most people live their lives in a chronic low-level state of sympathetic overdrive, constantly overstimulated by noise, deadlines, devices, and emotional drama. In this state, your prefrontal cortex, the rational decision-making part of the brain, is suppressed, and your limbic system, the emotional reactive center, dominates. That's why in moments of anxiety, you can't think straight, even if you know logically that everything is fine. The good news is that the autonomic nervous system, once thought to be entirely involuntary, can be influenced through conscious practices. One of the fastest and most reliable ways to shift your internal state is through your breathing. Slowing your breath, especially elongating your exhales, signals safety to your brain and activates the parasympathetic nervous system. This downregulates stress hormones, reduces heart rate, and restores access to cognitive control. Breathing is like a remote control for your nervous system, and it's available to you at all times. A few minutes of controlled nasal breathing in through the nose for about 4 seconds, out through the nose for 6 to 8 seconds can shift you from reactive to responsive, from emotional to rational. Another pathway into autonomic control is your visual system. The brain and eyes are directly connected, and the way you use your vision changes your internal state. When you're stressed, your visual field narrows, a mechanism designed to focus on threats. This tunnel vision is often paired with mental rigidity and anxiety. But when you intentionally widen your field of view by relaxing your gaze and becoming aware of your peripheral vision, you send a signal to your brain that the environment is safe. This automatically lowers stress and creates the conditions for clearer thinking. Practicing panoramic vision for even 30 seconds in moments of tension can shift your internal state dramatically. Physical posture also plays a role in nervous system regulation. When you're slouched, shallow breathing and compressed organs signal to the brain that something is wrong. Upright, open posture combined with calm breathing enhances feelings of agency and safety. Movement, particularly walking or rhythmic activity like cycling or light stretching, also activates neural circuits that help regulate the autonomic system. The key principle is that the body influences the mind just as much as the mind influences the body. Many people try to control their thoughts through sheer willpower, but they neglect the body's role in shaping the mind. If your physiology is dysregulated, your mind will struggle to stabilize. But when you learn to control your internal state, your mind becomes easier to guide. Emotional regulation, focus, patience, clarity, all of these are far more accessible when your nervous system is in balance. Mind control begins with state control. Learn to shift your body from fight or flight to calm engagement, and you create the foundation upon which true mental control is built. One of the most overlooked tools for gaining control over the mind is understanding how to use your vision and breath to intentionally shift your mental state. These are not abstract techniques. They are rooted in deeply embedded biological mechanisms that evolved over thousands of years to help humans navigate danger, maintain focus, and return to calm. The way you use your eyes and lungs sends immediate, powerful signals to the brain about what kind of environment you're in, whether it's safe or dangerous, whether you should be alert or relaxed, whether it's time to act or reflect. If you want to gain mastery over your internal state, you must learn how to work with these systems on purpose. Your eyes are not just passive tools for seeing the world, they are extensions of the brain itself. In fact, A portion of the brain protrudes forward during development and becomes the retina. The way you direct your gaze has an immediate effect on your level of arousal and alertness. For example, when you engage in focused vision, when you stare at a screen, read a book, or zero in on a task, your brain shifts into a more alert, task-oriented state. This is driven by a rise in norepinephrine and other neuromodulators that increase attention and suppress distraction. Focused vision is a tool to enter a state of mental engagement. If you want to enter a deep work state, begin by narrowing your visual field and deliberately fixing your gaze on one point. This simple act can help trigger the neural state required for concentration. On the other hand, when you widen your gaze, expanding your peripheral vision and relaxing the eyes without fixating, you activate a completely different neural circuit. This type of panoramic vision is associated with a calm, open state of awareness. It reduces the level of internal tension and helps deactivate the body's stress response. Practicing panoramic vision, especially in moments of anxiety or overwhelm, can help you access more cognitive control and emotional balance. You can test this in real time. The next time you feel anxious or mentally crowded, step back, soften your gaze, and notice the space to the left and right of your visual field. Almost instantly, you'll feel a shift toward calm. This is not psychological, it's neurological. Your brain reads wide vision as a cue that the environment is safe, which suppresses the alarm systems in the limbic brain. Breathing operates under similar principles. It's the only autonomic function, like heart rate or digestion, that you can also control voluntarily. This makes it a powerful bridge between the body and the mind. The length and rhythm of your breath directly influence your internal state. Short, shallow, rapid breathing triggers a sympathetic state, preparing the body for action, but also increasing anxiety and impulsivity. In contrast, slow, controlled breathing, especially when the exhale is longer than the inhale, promotes a parasympathetic state. This is the rest and digest mode where the brain becomes more reflective, focused, and calm. A simple protocol such as inhaling through the nose for 4 seconds, holding for 1 second, and exhaling for 6 to 8 seconds can reset your mental state in under 2 minutes. You are not calming your mind by talking to it. You're using your breath to directly signal your brainstem that all is well. Combining visual control and breath control creates a fast, accessible method to shift your mental state without relying on motivation or willpower. These tools are always available. You don't need a quiet room, special equipment, or perfect circumstances. You just need awareness and a little bit of discipline to use them deliberately. Over time, the more you practice shifting your internal state with vision and breath, the more control you gain over the mind itself. You begin to realize that your thoughts don't need to dictate your state. Your actions can lead. And once you can change your state on command, you gain the ability to meet stress, fear, fatigue, or distraction not with reactivity, but with conscious control. That is the gateway to true mental mastery. Focus is not a fixed trait. It is a trainable skill. And more importantly, it is a state that can be deliberately cultivated and protected. In today's world, most people suffer not from a lack of intelligence or ambition, but from an inability to sustain deep focus for extended periods. We live in an age of hyperstimulation where our attention is constantly fragmented by endless notifications, social media, and digital multitasking. The result is that our brains adapt to distraction. Neural pathways that favor short bursts of attention become dominant, while those required for deep, sustained thinking grow weaker from disuse. If you want to control your mind, you must reclaim your attention. Focus is the gatekeeper of mental discipline. What you focus on shapes what you think, how you feel, and what actions you take. Without the ability to guide and sustain attention, control over the mind becomes impossible. Training focus begins with eliminating the constant dopamine drip that comes from scattered, low-effort stimulation. Every time you shift your attention, whether it's checking your phone, scrolling aimlessly, or responding to irrelevant input, your brain releases a little hit of dopamine. These tiny spikes are pleasurable in the moment, but destructive in the long term. They condition your brain to seek novelty and reward without effort. Over time, your tolerance rises and you become bored easily, unable to stay with anything that doesn't provide instant gratification. This is not just a productivity issue. It's a wiring issue. You are literally training your brain to become addicted to distraction. The first step to reclaiming focus is to reduce the noise. Cut down on passive consumption, block off time away from screens, and give your brain space to reset. Stillness is not a luxury, it's the soil where deep thought grows. Once you've cleared some space, the next step is to engage in deliberate practice. Focus improves through repetition, just like a muscle. Start small. Choose one task and set a timer for 10 minutes. During that time, do nothing else. When your mind wanders, bring it back again and again. That simple act of returning your attention is the neurological rep that strengthens your prefrontal cortex. Over time, increase the duration, just like progressive overload in physical training. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is repetition. Each time you resist distraction, you're teaching your brain how to hold steady under pressure. Over time, this will become your new default. To deepen your focus further, work in rhythm with your brain's natural attention cycles. The human brain can typically sustain deep focus for 90 minutes at a time, followed by a period of rest. Using focused work blocks, often called ultradian cycles, with built-in breaks helps maintain high cognitive output without burning out your system. During breaks, avoid switching to highly stimulating content. Instead, engage in something restorative, a walk, breathwork, or simply sitting in silence. This not only refreshes your attention, but also improves memory consolidation and learning. Another key to eliminating cognitive clutter is single tasking. Multitasking is a myth. The brain doesn't do two things at once. It switches rapidly between them, degrading performance with each switch. Every time you switch tasks, there is a cost, a measurable drop in cognitive efficiency known as attention residue. You carry mental remnants of the previous task into the next, slowing your processing and decision making. To gain control of your mental resources, commit to one task at a time. Put your full attention there, you'll get better results, and train your brain to favor depth over shallowness. Lastly, realize that focus is not just about work, it's about integrity. Where you place your attention is a reflection of your values and priorities. If your mind is constantly pulled in 1,000 directions, ask yourself who or what is steering the ship. To control your mind is to take ownership of your attention. It is to decide what deserves your energy and what does not. That decision, repeated consistently, becomes a habit. And that habit, over time, becomes character. When you eliminate cognitive junk and train focus deliberately, you don't just think better, you become better. When it comes to mastering the mind, one of the most overlooked truths is that consistency beats intensity. Many people approach mental control as a dramatic all-or-nothing event, a burst of discipline, a single moment of breakthrough, or a sudden surge of motivation that changes everything. But that is not how the brain works. Real change, especially at the neural level, happens slowly and progressively, shaped by what you do every single day. It is not about doing something once with massive effort. It is about doing something consistently with intention. The brain wires itself through repetition. The nervous system needs repetition, not perfection. That is how you create lasting pathways of focus, emotional regulation, clarity, and discipline. If you want to control your mind, you must embrace the boring, the repetitive, and the daily. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself, is a slow, incremental process. It doesn't respond to how intensely you want something in a single moment, but to how reliably you act over time. You are training your nervous system not just in high-stakes moments, but in all the small ones you think don't matter. The moment you choose to sit in silence instead of checking your phone, the moment you push through the final minutes of a focused session, the moment you slow your breathing when agitated, these small, consistent actions are what build mental control. The brain tracks patterns, not isolated events. Each time you repeat a behavior aligned with self-control, you're casting a vote for your kind of person you are becoming, and your brain responds by strengthening the circuits that support that identity. Many people overestimate what they can change in a day, but underestimate what they can transform in a year. Daily rituals matter far more than motivational speeches or one-time efforts. 5 minutes of breath work every day is more powerful than 1 hour once a week. 10 minutes of uninterrupted focused practice daily will rewire your brain faster than sporadic deep work once in a while. Your brain rewards consistency with efficiency. What begins as effort eventually becomes automatic. This is how habits form. And habits are the foundation of mind control. The nervous system doesn't need drama, it needs discipline. Also, understand that control does not mean intensity without rest. In fact, consistent mental control depends on adequate recovery. Just as physical muscles grow through the balance of stress and rest, so does your mental strength. Sleep, nutrition, movement, and downtime are not optional luxuries. They are non-negotiable components of a healthy, adaptable brain. Sleep, in particular, plays a vital role in consolidating the very neural changes you're trying to create through daily training. You're not just recovering energy during sleep. Your brain is literally reorganizing itself, strengthening the connections you've used, and pruning away those you haven't. If you neglect recovery, your ability to sustain control breaks down. There will be days when you don't feel like doing the work, when resistance shows up, when progress seems invisible. But that is the exact moment when consistency matters most. Mental strength is forged in those quiet, unseen moments when you keep your word to yourself, even when no one's watching. This is how you earn trust with your own mind. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be consistent enough for your brain to know that you are serious about change. Each time you show up, you're proving to your mind that you are the one in control, not your moods, not your distractions, not your impulses. In the end, mastering your mind is not about flipping a switch. It's about laying a brick every single day. And when you do that long enough, you build something solid, a resilient, focused, grounded mind. That kind of mind doesn't panic under pressure, doesn't chase every distraction, and doesn't rely on temporary motivation. It operates from discipline, clarity, and control. That is not something you find. It's something you build. Slowly, daily, relentlessly.